Hi everyone, it's Denise Brown from the Caregiving Years Training Academy. Thanks so much for being with us this week. We have a special event which we're calling Care and Share, our big ideas. Each day for the next 5 days, we're going to present 2 ideas to you. Our presenters are going to go back to back, and then we'll have 40 minutes for discussion. If you are here to get CEUs, please note that I will send an evaluation to everyone on Friday afternoon. Complete your evaluation, and then we'll send your CEU certificate within 5 business days that we receive your evaluation. We would love everyone to complete an evaluation. If you want CEUs, you are required to complete an evaluation. We're going to post recordings and PowerPoints a week from today, so you'll have access to watch and download any of the material that we share with you today and the rest of this week. And that'll be available for you on October 12th, a week from today. Okay, I think we're going to start. So Dannelle is our first presenter. So Dannelle, take it away.
Thank you, Denise. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today for your big ideas, Care and Share. And thank you to Denise for the opportunity to share. I'm Dannelle LeBlanc, and today I'm talking about the Empowerment Project for Family Caregivers. Even if you've never personally run any kind of long distance race, you can understand the types of hurdles on the course, can test our strength, and can unavoidably throw us off track. So as advocates for a family member's care, we all know what it's like to encounter these types of hurdles, regardless of background or experience. For family caregivers of color, our caregiving race too often also includes the hurdles of harmful societal assumptions, less access to care and quality standards of care, fewer treatment options, and less support. And these kinds of hurdles are even built into the medical equipment of our healthcare system itself. So, for example, there was a recent publication by Boston Review highlighting how pulse oximeters, which are frequently used medical device used to measure oxygen levels in the blood. And this medical device works by reading light that passes through the skin. And most of the oximeters on the market today have been calibrated to work with light-colored skin, which means that if you or your loved one have darker colored skin, the probability of error in the reading increases. During the COVID-19 public health emergency, as we bear witness to people of color disproportionately contracting and dying from COVID-19, our healthcare system is using these oximeters as a primary way to determine if and when someone needs to be admitted to the hospital for care. And as family caregivers, monitoring oxygen levels at home as a way to let us know when and if our loved one we need to seek critical care on behalf of a loved one, it's one of the many hidden hurdles that can make the difference between life and death. So even when a healthcare provider is doing everything they possibly can as an individual to provide quality care, this single factor illustrates how deeply racial bias is embedded into the system and impacts standard of care and support services regardless of our intent to do the best we can. So it's painfully clear we're long overdue in creating accessible resources that address and empower the needs of underserved family caregivers. And this project is inspired, just to give you a little background, by my mom's lifetime of work as a social worker and family caregiver. It's informed by her thousands of pages of ideas and writings about community education. It's motivated by my personal experience as both a patient and a family caregiver. And it's further informed by input from family caregivers of color and experience as an educational trainer for chronic disease patients and healthcare providers, as well as by caregiving experts who, like Denise, who are committed to making a difference for all. So this is a hub of resources and information to help minimize the impact of inherent racial bias within the healthcare system and to help give us a say in defining the standards of care. The Empowerment Project for Family Caregivers involves resources and activities, including connecting family caregivers to healthcare advocates of color who understand the challenges and can offer effective ways to address those challenges. Resource guides like the Caregiving Community Guide, which is an inclusive resource directory offering information, contacts, education, and other resources that are specific to the experience of underserved family caregivers. It includes seeking and supporting grants that fund community training and tools created for family caregivers of color. For example, doctors have charts, patient charts, right? So what if we had a chart for our care experience? A chart to document, rate, and report our experience of care. And so I have a sample of what it looks like here, and this is available as a handout that you'll get from Denise. But it is to document your experience, the questions that you ask, questions and concerns that are not addressed, and then to rate that experience and report it as well when needed. So why is this something that is going to help change the community, our system? The Empowerment Project for Family Caregivers help improve the healthcare system for all of us because information is power. It's the hallmark of civilization to stop and help those who are in harm's way. When we know what questions to ask, where the potholes in the system are, what our rights are, we are empowered. Although this project is a resource that can empower us as individuals and as a community, the single most effective catalyst to changing the healthcare system from within is the impact on the bottom line dollar. So for example, tools like the Chart Your Care Experience can help affect change within the system because the insurance reimbursement that healthcare providers receive, most of which are Medicare providers, is directly related to patient satisfaction. And so by documenting and reporting our care experience, we can influence rates of reimbursement based on the quality of care received. If you're interested in contributing to or learning more about the Empowerment Project for Family Caregivers, including notification about our work, then you can sign up at the bit.ly link there, Empower Care, to share your hurdles, what makes a difference for you, and your suggestions for resources to consider. Thank you.
Thanks, Dannelle. Please put that link in the chat room.
Absolutely.
Okay, so Brian is going to pull up his PowerPoint and then we're going to move to Brian. And I just want to let you know that we're going to have a conversation about these two ideas after Brian's presentation. And you can use the chat room to ask questions, to share feedback. You can raise your hand and I'll call on you. I think those are the two easiest ways. So post in the chat room or raise your hand. Okay, Brian, go for it.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Denise. It's an absolute honor to be presenting at the Big Ideas event. My presentation is all about making smarter financial choices, and in particular, overcoming cognitive biases to make those choices. So my name is Brian Stumpf. I'm the founder of Two Coins Financial, where I help widows and widowers find financial confidence so that they can focus on themselves, their families, and their healing process. And I'm excited to share my big idea today because a number of people in my family have been caregivers. And I know that it's a labor of love, but it can also be a blessing. And as caregivers, we want to be present for our loved ones. We want to support them emotionally and perhaps even financially. So my thoughts today are all around how you can balance making sound financial choices for your future without kind of robbing from the present and the time with those that you care for. So part one, under siege. 80% of Americans today are shopping online. And just as a reminder, when you're online, everything that you do is being tracked, from what you watch to how much time you watch it, what you click on, what you like, what you buy, how long your mouse hovers over that buy now button before you actually click. So, and companies are using this data to exploit your cognitive biases. So what is a cognitive bias? So these were actually first studied in the early 1970s by Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman. And basically, they found that because our brains are constantly processing so much information, they end up taking shortcuts. And while using these shortcuts, our brains systematically and, more importantly, predictably make errors. And so my goal is, I would like to make you aware of some of these biases so that you can make more conscious decisions. So to give you an example here of what I'm talking about, I'll start with talking about the anchoring bias. And the anchoring bias is really when our brains rely too heavily or anchor on one piece of information when making a decision. And so when they studied this, they actually, they surveyed a number of people. They broke them into two groups, and they asked the first group of people, is the highest redwood tree in California more or less than 1,200 feet? And then after they answered that question, they'd ask, what is your best guess about the tallest redwood tree in California? Now, the second group of people, they asked the exact same question, except that data point, or that anchor that they gave, changed instead from 1,200 feet to 180 feet. And they found the results were staggering in the differences in their answers. So there's a 66% difference when they just changed the anchor, a little piece of data in their question. Now, anchoring is has its most powerful influence on our brains when it's a subject that we know relatively little about. So the height of trees, the price to manufacture and sell a car, or the one that I thought of the other day was the price of wine. So this is a great example of what we might see online. I went to our local grocer's website and I typed in a bottle from Napa Valley, and this particular bottle they were selling for $43, but it was on sale for $30. So at $13, you know, it might seem like a great discount. But there's also, if you know where to look, there's also a lot of data online about the price of wine as well. And so I was able to track this exact bottle of wine over time and found that the price of this bottle has been decreasing. And on average, it's actually been selling for $30 in 2019. So Mariano's really isn't selling that for a discount at all. They're just making our brain, they're making our brain think that there's a higher value on this item than there actually is. The second bias that we see frequently online is the scarcity bias. A scarcity bias is our brain assuming that things are scarce are valuable and things that are abundant are not valuable. So a great example of this, you'll see this like on Airbnb, for example. This was when I was looking for an Airbnb in Michigan a couple of months ago. And you can see sort of there were over 300 stays. I didn't care where in Michigan I went, but there were over 300 places that were available for me. But Airbnb wanted to let me know that in one particular city, 70% of the places were already booked and that I should probably book soon. The third is the bandwagon bias. And this is basically the rate of uptake of beliefs or ideas or trends, and that increases with respect to the proportion of other people who have already done a particular thing. So we see this one a lot on hotel websites, for example. So this is hotels.com. I took this screenshot when I was looking to book a hotel room. And you can see the example of the bandwagon bias. Someone just booked this room. They even threw in the scarcity bias for good measure. Their room is in high demand and only 3 left on their website. So, And companies, there's even companies that work with companies to quickly test minor changes to their websites to see which options will most effectively exploit our biases. And so this particular website, you can see here, they're sort of bragging to the companies that they work with that they're able to really reach deeply into their customers' pockets and, and end up extracting more money for the customers. So part two, counterattack. So my goal, it's not to scare you, it's just to make you aware and remember that websites and social media, they're armed with research and data. And if you're aware, you can make better financial decisions. So some of the things I like to recommend is forcing a pause before you buy something online. So rather than clicking the buy it now button, I recommend if you do nothing else, disable all of the one-click purchases. Amazon is a big one, but you can disable that pretty easily. But how about some other things? I mean, how about doing 25 sit-ups before you buy something online, or something else, something else that might feel uncomfortable for you. Creating hurdles. So creating hurdles is a great way when you're struggling with a particular goal. If you create a hurdle, you can actually have that hurdle help prevent you from doing the thing that you don't want, rather than needing to draw on your own personal self-control. I think any of us who have craved ice cream late at night know that if it's not in the freezer, it's easier to get over that issue. So one of the things that I do, for instance, for clients who are struggling with spending too much online or perhaps emotional spending, is we'll have them buy a Visa gift card, preloaded money that they, however much money they want to spend online that month, they'll preload it so that they can't go over that budget. You could even add an incentive. So adding a physical, tangible incentive is a great way to strengthen your determination to do something difficult. So, and you can think about what it is you love to do or eat or experience and tie that to the difficult thing. So that brings me to my call to action. As you can see, personal finances, they're not rocket science. The concepts are relatively basic, but it's about changing behavior, and changing behavior is difficult. So that's where my call to action focuses. The first thing that I would like you to do is find an accountability partner. Find a family member or a friend or a coach who will hold you accountable to your financial goals. The second thing, and perhaps the most important, I would really encourage this, is to schedule a weekly meeting with yourself and your partner if possible, or if applicable. And really keep this meeting to only 15 minutes. Don't go over this, but get in the habit, tie it to something else that you do throughout the week. And over time, as you have this 15 minutes, you can think of, okay, what went well financially last week? What didn't go so well? And think about the upcoming week and think about what you'd like to do better then. And over time, you'll kind of slowly develop the habits and the outcomes that you're looking for. Finally, and this is totally optional because I just recommended spending less time on social media and Amazon and things that are looking to get into your wallet. But if you are on Instagram, you can follow me on 2 Coins Financial. I post some interesting information there from time to time. So, and that's really the extent of my presentation. What I wanted to say, just know that while you're online, you're being targeted. And so being aware of how our brains work and what these websites are doing will help you have that counterattack. And remember, especially with the 15-minute meeting, that personal finances, it's a process, not an event, and it's about progress, not perfection. But with this call to action, I believe caregivers can plan for tomorrow while enjoying the present and the time with their loved ones.
Okay, thank you, Brian. So I'm going to open it up. If you have any questions or thoughts or feedback, please feel free to share in the chat room. In addition, please feel free to raise your hand and I'll call on you. And I just want to mention that what was interesting about your 2 ideas, which I did not know when I scheduled it, is that you both really talked about bias.
Yes.
And how the healthcare system has a bias that it's all a certain type of person that receives care. and that the bias that we make decisions that they are really giving us the lowest price and there really is scarcity with rooms when maybe that is not necessarily the complete picture. That's how I'll phrase that. Okay, so we do have a couple questions in the chat room. So Dannelle, this is from Bobby. Thank you, Bobby. Dannelle, is there an accurate way to measure oxygen levels in people of color that is available readily?
So thank you so much for that question, Bobby. Disclaimer, y'all, I am not a medical professional. But what I do know is that there are some oximeters that are available that are more accurate than others. So this is kind of an ongoing process. So you guys may be aware that a lot of these types of issues are built into technology that we use every day. We've seen it with photography and lighting. You know, you guys may remember that whole big thing with Oprah where she, you know, purchased her own special lighting that would reflect well on darker skin. It's been built into technology like the Fitbit. And so it's about doing the research and just being aware of it, and then asking someone who is an expert and can answer that question, and having the discussion with a healthcare provider.
So Heather,
great question.
Yeah, and Heather has a follow-up question to that, and she's wondering, can the you know what, I'm not going to say that, pulse oximeter, I have to say both words, pulse oximeter, be recalibrated for darker skin tones?
So I am not a technical guru. So I will, you know what, as a matter of fact, as we move forward, I will find the link to this article and post it in the chat room, because it provides a lot more detail than I can. But the thing is that the answer is yes, it is possible to calibrate the oximeter. It's just that it wasn't when it first came out, and a lot of the products that came out, it just wasn't. It was calibrated in order to work based on light colored skin.
And I actually know just a little bit about this, so I'll chime in.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, a bit. I'm not a doctor either, but and I never have played one on TV. But I did used to work in the medical space, and in the company I worked for, they did sell oximeters. And there is technology actually that will work on different skin tones. But oftentimes it's the hospitals that have these, and the technology is, it's much more expensive. So oftentimes the first check will be a pulse oximeter that they put on your fingertip. And those, honestly, they can cost in the range of like $5 to $10. But the other more advanced technology that they're using in the hospitals, and likely that, you know, may have been, you know, some of the things that they're using right now for COVID, is these are multi-$1,000 instruments, you know, that are in a couple hotel or a couple hospital rooms, and they typically wheel them around, you know, and they have a couple per floor. So yeah, it's just the availability of that technology is a lot different as well. Again, you know, Dannelle, I think one of the very interesting things that you said is, hey, this needs to impact the bottom line. And, you know, I think that's sort of an example of it right there. Like this more expensive technology just isn't readily available.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was just going to mention, it also is empowering us to ask the right questions. So we're asking the right questions about making a decision with our money, but we're also asking the right question about how our health is actually being evaluated. So the question can be, how well does this piece of equipment work with my skin color?
Exactly. Exactly. That's exactly was one of my sample questions. Is how well does this equipment work with my skin color, as well as, you know, we have an appointment with a healthcare professional to ask questions about their, you know, depending on whatever the diagnosis is or whatever the concern is, you know, their success working with African Americans or Latinas, whatever the situation is. just so that you introduce that as part of the conversation, as being a variable in the quality of care that we receive.
So I want to just take your idea about the patient experience survey just a little bit further. You alluded to the idea that Medicare does surveys of facilities and then rates them. And you can go to medicare.gov and see the rating of a home health agency or a skilled nursing facility in your community. But what they don't rate is how well do they accommodate a variety of patients, which would be a great question for someone who's doing a survey of facilities to actually ask and to really learn. I mean, this sounds kind of crazy. So I guess we're going with big ideas, so we're not going to judge our big ideas before they come out. So just go with me here. Yeah. The idea of what population does this particular facility serve so that I can better decide whether or not they can serve my population. So thinking about a specialty like dementia care could be culturally sensitive facilities, so that you feel comfortable going into a facility knowing that they are going to be culturally sensitive to what you need.
Absolutely. That it also ties into, one of the, list of questions, sample questions. And so my thought was, so say you are, and this can be something that you're reporting to Medicare.gov. And I was specifically referring to, when it comes to reporting, there's a QIC form. Don't quote me on that. The link is on that care experience chart, but it is to report concerns about quality of care. That's also on Medicare.gov. So what Denise is talking about is when you're doing your research to find out what the Medicare rating is, but then there's also a form that after a healthcare experience, if you have concerns, you can also report that as well. To your point, Denise, about what's it like at, say, some type of senior living community. So say you are looking for some type of assisted living or memory care residence, whatever the senior living community is. If you think about, one of the quality of life services that is often advertised, you'll see things like we have a legacy or down memory lane type experience or celebration. And if we're talking about going down memory lane experience, or this for older adults, say it's set 1950, that memory and experience is going to look and feel very different for Black residents. So how do we honor the legacy and historical memories of residents of color? So those types of concerns and issues that can come up, you guys have seen, like, you do like the walk through the little town where it's, set up, this old-timey town. Well, in that time frame, Black people wouldn't have been allowed to be in that little town. Right? So how do we address that? So just thinking about inclusive ways to create quality of life, and that it's not something that's a universal experience for everyone.
Okay, and we have a question in the chat room for Brian. And I am interested in this question because I myself would ask this. How receptive are your clients when you ask them to pause before making a purchase? And especially the 25 sit-ups.
I noticed that one got a couple of head turns. So, the question for pausing, it's really, like I mentioned, it's meant to give your brain some time to think about like the choice that it actually wants to make. And so when I'm working with clients, one of the first things that we do is we align, we sort of put together, call it a spending plan or a budget, but we align where they want to spend their money with their goals. And, and I feel like, once you do that, then you kind of know, okay, this is where I'm comfortable spending money. And like, I feel like there's a lot of things that are possible on any income, just not everything. And so we all need to prioritize, and we all need to kind of think about the things that are most important to us. And then the taking that pause is really the time to reflect and say, is this something that's going to, bring me happiness? There's a lot of research out there around our dopamine receptors as well, and how our bodies react to that feeling of making a purchase, especially online. And places online, they really are getting more attuned to having multiple times through that buying experience when you get little bits of dopamine. Dopamine, by the way, they're sort of like your pleasure receptors in the brain. It's kind of what makes you feel, like a little sense of happiness. It's a fleeting sense, but when you click that buy button, when you get the email that says your shipment is on its way, when it arrives and you open it. But then, is that, like I used the handbag in my presentation there, but is that something then that you're going to use, or is it going to sit in the closet with its tags on? Are you going to be as excited when the Visa bill comes? So, what success, I guess, get back to the question, what sort of success do I actually have? It really, the way that I have success with that is by getting folks to have a strong understanding of why they're doing what they're doing, what's important to them. If without that, it's very difficult. Without that, I've seen clients way overspend on things and then do it again sort of month after month. But if they do have a strong reason why they're doing it, then I actually see a lot more success. So yeah, the push-ups help, or the sit-ups help, but it's also sort of about the connection in your mind as well. That was a great question. Whoever asked that, thanks.
Yeah, I love that you are emphasizing this pause, and the examples that you shared, that all of which kind of speak to a sense of creating a sense of urgency. So it's kind of playing on, our emotions to have this sense of urgency.
Absolutely.
And, as family caregivers, so much of what we do is around, having this sense of urgency. And so bringing attention to, okay, when we're online and we're making a decision about a purchase, to pause that mindset of sense of urgency, I think is helpful.
Such a great insight. I really appreciate that. Yes, I think oftentimes in life, if we can stop, take a moment to reflect, and then move forward, probably benefits us in a lot of different areas. But that's a great point.
I want to ask you about the patient experience survey that all hospitals send out after a hospitalization, Dannelle. Tell me again, how do they address cultural sensitivity during that survey?
Are you talking about the survey that they use right now?
Let's say my dad's hospitalized. Next 3 days, he goes home. We get that email that says, please complete this patient experience survey. What would I expect in terms of cultural sensitivity?
I don't know what all of the specific questions are from the hospital survey that's being used. I do know that it does not address these types of issues about racial bias that are embedded into the healthcare system. It's more about what an individual experience was like. So if I have an encounter with an individual within the hospital, then I have a mechanism to report that or to bring up concerns, but not necessarily about the system itself. And so So I think that creating a way for us to document that and to provide feedback in some type of free form way is helpful. It's not something that we're going to, I think that hospital systems are going to universally create on their own. It's going to have to be something that comes from us, that we're communicating back to the healthcare provider.
Here in the Chicagoland area, we have a focus on older adults who are Jewish. So we have the name of the social service agency, which I've known for years, just completely escaped me. Anyway, so they do
Jewish Family Services.
It's similar to that, but it's
Okay.
not. It's similar to that. So they do a fantastic job training staff on how to manage when a Holocaust survivor, for instance, is really having horrible memories. How do they manage the actual bathing process so it doesn't bring up all these just horrific memories? I'm just curious, have you ever known of a facility, or have you heard of a facility that does culturally sensitive training so that when a staff member is interacting with a person of color, they are interacting with the knowledge that I'm going to be careful of what I say and how I say it, and how I manage if there's any difficult memories that are coming up?
So I'm in the North Texas area. I'm not aware of any facilities that have that kind of a focus or that advertise that kind of a focus. You know, I think it goes back to the individuals who were within the community. So who's the staff? So depending on who the staff is, that individual has an awareness that this may be a concern, this may be an impact, this may be perceived in a particular way. And so, you know, I think the diversity of staff is an indicator of what that environment might be like, and not just on one level, right?
Well,
So
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I guess diversity of staff wouldn't indicate to me anything other than that's the staff, but it would be diversity of residents would indicate whether or not the type of care is appropriate for a variety of
absolutely,
cultures.
Absolutely. Diversity of residents and diversity of staff on all levels, right? So not just in one type of role, but in all different kinds of roles. Because your staff, so depending, and it also depends on what type of environment it is, because in nursing homes, where, you know, it's you tend to have higher populations of lower income residents, then you may have a wide diversity of residents, but it's still not necessarily a culturally competent environment.
Okay, so we've got an insight from the chat room.
And Bobby has her hand up too.
Pardon?
And Bobby has her hand up too.
Oh, okay, great. I'm going to read the comment.
Raising her hand.
Oh, she's literally raising her hand. Okay, yeah, there actually is something in you can actually raise your hand through the Zoom. There's a Zoom feature. So, but let's see. So CMS sends dialysis patients a 60-question survey, and it's the same questions as it's been for years. Not diversified at all and needs to be. Boy, that's so true about the healthcare system. It's all about what we've always done, right, rather than what's currently needed. Okay, Bobby, go ahead. I just asked you to unmute.
Well, Dannelle and the rest of the group, I just wanted to mention that I've been in touch with and working with an organization called SAGE, that is an LGBTQ community that are going into nursing homes and hospitals and educating people on how people in the LGBT community are going back in the closet because they're fearful of how they're going to be treated within in the nursing homes. And of course, when they go in there, they're told, well, you know, we treat everybody the same. Of course, it's not a problem. But what they don't understand is what you're saying, Dannelle, about the people of color. There's nothing there that shows somebody when they go in there that they recognize even that they have people in this community. So it's very much working with getting people into these communities and teaching them that their bias is they treat everybody the same, but they don't. And my suggestion was it might be beneficial for maybe you to connect with somebody, and I can connect you with those people to see how they establish their programs to show that, you know, in your brochure, you should have a gay couple, you know, participating and making sure that you have activities that are meaningful for those people. And until they brought it up to my attention, just like you brought up the pulse oximeter to my attention, I didn't realize what I didn't know.
Right. I mean, so few of us do, you know, and so it's, you know, we walk into situations sometimes blinded, not knowing what questions to ask. There is, I'm so glad that you mentioned SAGE, because I think that's a great organization. There's an organization here in the North Texas area called Educare. And they do a fantastic job. Their focus is working with LGBTQ individuals and caregivers, which is so, I mean, it's fantastic, doing educational training programs to help LGBTQ individuals and caregivers navigate the healthcare system, as well as educating healthcare providers.
Exactly.
Because, you know, to see Abel's point about the 60-question survey being the same question that it's been for years, well, you know, if we're using that, you know, asking those same questions, we know that they're not inclusive of the concerns and challenges that LGBTQ people face.
You know,
So,
I want to mention something. We've got just about 8 minutes, and that is the missing conversation around this in a facility or a community is the other residents. So we could trade the staff all we want, but the other residents might have their own bias that they bring. So for instance, you could just wear the wrong piece of jewelry to dinner and, you know, Myrna and Sally are going to be, you know, giving you the silent treatment because it does seem to regress to middle school. There was this great article in the New York Times about what your experience is like in a community. It's like being back in middle school. So the staff could be well trained, but how do we actually then impart that knowledge and acceptance with residents? And that's one of the bigger problems, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think that as much as I would like for that to be something that we can change, I think that's one of the factors that is largely outside of our control.
Yeah.
I remember going into, I had my one of my sisters gave me a necklace with a Chi pendant on it, which is the symbol for life. And I was going into this facility for this event, and it was so funny because I got all kinds of side eye for wearing my Chi symbol, which is a Jewish symbol. And so it was just, you know, to your point about how the other residents behave, it's very true that, you know, you have the same kind of clicks and that sort of thing going on, and just to be mindful of that. And when you have people who don't fit into the majority, what their experience is like, and how you can help them, how we can help them feel welcome, and to demonstrate that they belong, that we belong, we all belong.
Yeah. And I think typically what the solution was for many years was almost like, you know, again, I feel funny using these words, but it almost felt like we segregated, right? So in Chicago, we have segregation by communities of where you live. So, you know, the North Side, it's not just a Cub fan on the North Side, it's where the white people live. On the South Side, you're a Sox fan, but it's also where persons of color live. So we have these segregated communities. And then I think we took that idea of segregation so that we feel like we belong, right? Into the healthcare system and how we receive services and help, because we want to feel like we belong and will be understood
Right.
and respected. And so we can't necessarily trust another community if they look like they won't accept us or allow us to feel like we belong.
Right. Right. Which is also, which is why it becomes, it's such a factor for families of color, for people of color and family caregivers of color to not even consider assisted living or memory care or a nursing home, because they're like, okay, we know what's going to happen there if we're not there to watch out for them. So that's not even an option. So that becomes an additional burden, you know, because we want best quality of life possible. And if we're putting our loved one in a situation where they're going to be targeted, then, you know, no wonder. So, you know, you have such a low population of people who are even considering it.
Yes, right. Because historically you were risking more than what you could risk for.
Yes.
So Teresa has a suggestion for everybody. If you're interested in learning more about what Brian was talking about regarding social media and how it is taking over our lives, oh my gosh. So The Social Dilemma on Netflix is a documentary that she recommends. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So we have 3 minutes left. I just want to give everybody one last chance to ask questions, offer feedback, share experiences. And a
I have one more piece of feedback for Brian, and the idea about the weekly meeting, finance meeting. I mean, that is a great idea. Keeping it to 15 minutes, tying it to something else that you're doing. I'm going to do that.
Okay. All right. Okay.
That's wonderful. Thanks, Dannelle. Yeah, that's definitely one thing that I encourage. You know, because there's in a lot of relationships, there tends to be the person who, you know, is the finance nerd and likes their spreadsheets. I mean, that's me. And then, you know, there's my wife, and she's like, look, I want to deal with stuff as little as possible. Like, I want to make sure that we're making good choices, but I don't want to spend hours on this a week. And yeah, and this is a great way of slowly doing it over time.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's the commitment to the 15 minutes. So you're actually giving us the bite-sized experience rather than waiting for the end of the month or the beginning of the month and then just having this long drawn-out meeting.
Absolutely. Yeah, making just kind of forming those great habits. So thanks, Dannelle.
Oh yeah, so Dannelle, if we have attendees who work within a system or work within a facility, what's your call to action for them?
So my call to action is to sign up for the notification list, because this is a project in development. This is not something that is in its last stages, because you know, even though I've had this personal experience, it requires feedback from other family caregivers of color, from, you know, other healthcare advocates of color, to be part of this project. And so I ask for people to share their hurdles, And then the other piece is to document and report your experience, regardless of whether or not, you know, you use that chart that I created. But there's a link there. So if you have issues or concerns, to report that, begin reporting that.
I guess I would add a call to action that if you work in a facility or within the healthcare system, to start a conversation with other staff members around the idea that maybe there's a racial bias that we're overlooking. And how can we really start a conversation within the team that spreads to within the facility and within the system? Because it starts with just a few individuals saying, let's change this. Let's figure out how to change this.
Right.
And Brian,
with that not having to always come from a person of color, right? So you don't have to be a person of color to be invested in this idea.
That's right. That's right. And you know, I just also want to mention one other thing. We did do a really great conversation around systemic bias as a family caregiver. So we had a panel discussion in June, and you can watch that panel discussion on our website. And I'll include that in our archive, which includes the videos and the PowerPoints. I'll include a couple links. And then Dannelle will also send me the link to the information about the pulse oximeter, and I'll include that as well.
Yes.
Okay, Brian, you gave us some great call to actions. If you had to pick one that you think is going to change our lives, what's the call to action?
Yeah, honestly, Denise, it would be that 15-minute meeting. In that 15-minute meeting, because over time you're going to end up talking about a lot of different things, either thinking through them yourself or with your partner. And within that, I would recommend that in the first couple of meetings, you think really critically about what the things are that truly motivate you and that are most meaningful to you, so that you can, future meetings you can use to make sure that the choices that you're making are aligned with those things that you truly care about.
Okay. And thanks everybody for being here. So we're going to continue our big ideas tomorrow, same time, 1 p.m. Eastern time. We have 2 new ideas. We're going to follow the same format. We're going to record, and we look forward to your feedback, your insights, and your suggestions for us. We're grateful that you were here with us, and we will see you tomorrow. Thanks, everyone.